The elite crowd expected a simple performance from his charity case, but her revelation about the twins' paternity sent his future father-in-law storming out in rage. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The cutting Manhattan wind seemed to pierce through Lydia Washington's thin wool coat as she climbed the steps of the imposing building where Jonathan Cartwright III maintained his bachelor apartment. At 22, the young jazz singer from Harlem carried not only the positive pregnancy test in her pocket, but also naive hopes of a shared future with the heir to the Cartwright hotels. The doorman recognized her, nodding discreetly. He was already accustomed to seeing the beautiful young black woman go up to the penthouse in recent nights. "Miss Washington, Mr. Cartwright is expecting you." Lydia smiled, nervous. She had met Jonathan 6 months earlier when he appeared at the small bar where she sang 4 nights a week. She was struggling to pay bills while pursuing a dream of a music career. He was the rich Wall Street playboy who seemed enchanted by her powerful voice and authenticity. The romance had been intense and overwhelming. Now, the news of the pregnancy would change everything. Jonathan's apartment occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a snow-covered central park. When he opened the door, Lydia immediately noticed the tension in his jaw, the cold look. "Come in, I have a meeting in an hour." No kiss, no hug. Lydia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow outside. "Jonathan, we need to talk." Her fingers trembled as she removed the pregnancy test from her pocket. We're going to have a baby." The silence that followed was suffocating. Jonathan took the test, examined it for a long moment, then hurled it against the marble wall with such force that the plastic shattered. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" His voice was pure venom. "To get pregnant by the Cartwright heir? Secure your future? What are you talking about? We both—" "No, Lydia, there is no we. You were an interesting distraction, exotic even. But it's over." The words hit Lydia like physical blows as Jonathan walked across the apartment, pouring himself a whiskey. "The Cartwrights have a lineage of 150 years in this country. My father is finalizing a merger with Richardson Hotels. Did you really think I would throw that away for a bar singer who can barely make rent?" "I thought you said you loved me." Jonathan laughed, a cold sound that echoed in the minimalist apartment. "I said what you wanted to hear. A poor girl from Harlem would never be suitable for the Cartwright dynasty. Look at you. No connections, no proper education, nothing to offer except—" His eyes traveled over her body with disdain. "You were temporary entertainment, Lydia. Nothing more." In that moment, Lydia felt something inside her crumble. Tears streamed down as Jonathan opened his Italian leather briefcase, pulled out a checkbook, and filled one out with quick movements. "Here, $20,000. Take care of this and move on." "Take care of this? You want me to—" "Don't be dramatic. Discreet clinics exist for situations like this. Use the money, have the procedure done, and then maybe start a new life somewhere else. Los Angeles, perhaps? I heard they're always looking for pretty waitresses." When Lydia didn't take the check, Jonathan placed it on the coffee table and adjusted the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. "Don't complicate things, Lydia. If you try any kind of scandal, know that my father has contacts everywhere that matters. No record label will sign you, no club will let you sing. Don't even think about calling me. My father will ensure no door opens for you anywhere in this country." Lydia felt a sudden nausea, and it wasn't from the pregnancy. "You can't just erase a life like that. I can, and I will. And you should be grateful for the generosity. Many men in my position would offer nothing." That night, alone in her tiny Harlem apartment, Lydia discovered through an emergency ultrasound that she wasn't expecting one baby, but 2 twin girls. The black and white image of the 2 small lives growing inside her was the only light in the darkness of that brutal day. The following months were a test of survival. Evicted for failing to pay rent, Lydia moved into a back room at the house of her former singing teacher, Miss Ella. During the day, she worked as a receptionist at a medical office. At night, even with her growing belly, she sang in small bars that paid in cash. "You don't need him, honey," Miss Ella repeated while helping Lydia organize donated baby clothes. "Men like Jonathan Cartwright think they can buy and discard people like us. But you have something he'll never have: real talent and heart." On a rainy July afternoon, Lydia gave birth to Maya and Zora Washington. Looking at her daughter's perfect faces, she noticed the unmistakable green eyes, the Cartwright trademark she had seen in family photos that Jonathan proudly displayed. "You may have his eyes, but you'll have my strength," she whispered to the babies. "One day, he'll regret throwing us away like trash." When the twins were 6 months old, Lydia was exhausted, working 3 different jobs to support her daughters. That's when Marcus Jones, a veteran music producer who had seen her sing years before, appeared at one of the bars where she performed. "Your voice is even better, deeper. Pain has transformed you into something extraordinary," he said after her performance. "I have a small studio in Brooklyn. I can't promise anything, but I'd like to record some tracks with you." 3 months later, a demo recording of Lydia reached the hands of Etta Williams, a soul legend who had just launched her own independent label. Impressed with the rich voice and raw emotion in Lydia's original compositions, Etta offered not just a contract but a job in the administrative area of the small label. "You have an ear for business beyond musical talent," Etta observed after seeing how Lydia efficiently reorganized the label's chaotic office in her first month. At night, after the twins were asleep, Lydia studied the music industry business, finances, contracts. With each page read, with each new skill acquired, she made the same silent promise. "Jonathan Cartwright III, one day you'll look at me and realize that the biggest mistake of your life was underestimating me. And when that day comes, I won't need revenge. My success will be enough to show how wrong you were about everything." The next morning, Lydia woke before dawn, the twins still peacefully asleep in their crib. She gently touched their cherubic faces, marveling at how perfect they were despite the circumstances of their conception. Maya stirred slightly, her tiny hand grasping Lydia's finger with surprising strength. "That's right, baby girl," Lydia whispered. "We're fighters, all 3 of us." She moved quietly through the small room Miss Ella had generously cleared for them. The elderly woman had been more than a singing teacher. She'd become the mother figure Lydia had lost years ago. Her own mother had passed when Lydia was 16, leaving her to navigate the world alone, until now. Now she had 2 daughters depending on her. The morning routine had become a careful choreography: prepare bottles, change diapers, steal a quick shower while the babies were content, then dress for her receptionist job at Dr. Patterson's office. The elderly physician had taken a chance on her despite her obvious pregnancy, something Lydia would never forget. "You have a professional phone voice," he'd said during the interview, waving away her concerns about the pregnancy. "Patients respond to warmth and competence. The rest is irrelevant." If only the rest of the world operated on Dr. Patterson's principles. Miss Ella appeared in the doorway, already dressed despite the early hour. "I'll watch them until noon, then bring them to you for lunch break like always." "I don't know how I'll ever repay you," Lydia said, adjusting her simple blazer over a second-hand maternity blouse. "By succeeding," Miss Ella replied simply. "Success is the best revenge against a world that expects you to fail." The medical office was quiet in the morning hours, giving Lydia time to study the music business textbook she kept hidden beneath the reception desk. She'd borrowed it from the public library. Renewing it so many times, the librarian finally told her to keep it until she was done. Between scheduling appointments and filing insurance claims, she absorbed knowledge about publishing rights, distribution deals, and contract negotiations. At lunch, Miss Ella arrived with the twins in their second-hand stroller. Dr. Patterson had cleared a small break room where Lydia could nurse the babies and eat her simple sandwich. He occasionally poked his head in, making silly faces at the twins that always made them giggle. "They're thriving," he observed one day. Those eyes, though, quite unusual. Their father's eyes, Lydia said quietly. Ah, the doctor nodded, understanding in his gaze. Well, they have their mother's spirit. That's what matters in this world. After work came the night shift, singing at the Blue Note, a small jazz club that paid cash and didn't ask questions when she arrived with twin babies in tow. The owner's wife watched them in the back office while Lydia performed, her voice now carrying a depth and emotional resonance it hadn't possessed before. That night, as she sang a hauntingly beautiful rendition of Strange Fruit, she noticed a well-dressed man watching intently from the back of the room. He stayed through her entire set, nursing a single scotch, his eyes never leaving her. When she finished, he approached as she was packing up her music sheets. "Marcus Jones," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "I produce for Rhythm Records." Lydia's heart skipped. Rhythm Records was small but respected in the jazz community. "Your voice," he continued, shaking his head in wonder. "It's transformed since I heard you 2 years ago. There's something there now. Depth, pain, wisdom beyond your years." "Life experience," Lydia replied simply, glancing toward the office where her babies waited. "I have a small studio in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but good equipment. I'd like to record you, see what we can create." For the first time in months, Lydia felt a flicker of her old dream reigniting. Not extinguished after all, just banked like embers waiting for oxygen. "I have twins," she said bluntly. 6 months old. They go where I go." Marcus smiled. "My studio has a play area. My sister brings her kids all the time. Music should be in children's blood from the beginning." 3 days later, Lydia stood in Marcus's modest but professional studio, headphones over her ears, the twins sleeping peacefully in a portable crib in the control room. She sang her own composition, a song about resilience, about rising from ashes, about turning pain into power. When she finished the final note, she opened her eyes to see Marcus staring at her through the glass, something like awe on his face. He pressed the intercom button. "Lydia, that was... I don't even have words. That needs to be heard." Over the next weeks, they produced a 5-song EP of Lydia's original music. Marcus worked for free, believing so strongly in her talent that he invested his own time and resources. "This is going to Etta Williams," he told her one night as they finished the final mix. "She's starting her own label, looking for authentic voices. If anyone will understand what you're doing, it's Etta." Lydia tried not to hope too much. Hope had betrayed her before, but as she watched her daughters growing, becoming more alert and engaged with the world each day, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps their future could be different from her past. While looking at the ultrasound of her twin daughters, Lydia couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later, she would be the one signing acquisition documents for the Cartwright Company, with Jonathan begging for a chance to know the daughters he had rejected. While observing the ultrasound of her twin daughters, Lydia couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later, she would be the one signing acquisition documents for the Cartwright Company, with Jonathan begging for a chance to know the daughters he had rejected. The 2 worn suitcases felt heavier than they should as Lydia dragged them up the narrow staircase to Miss Ella's back room. Each step was a reminder of how quickly life could change, from a modest Harlem apartment with dreams of stardom to homelessness with twins growing inside her. The eviction notice had given her just 48 hours, the landlord unmoved by her pleas for more time. "That's the last one," Miss Ella said, taking the smaller bag from Lydia's hand. At 70, the former jazz singer still carried herself with the dignity of someone who had performed in venues across Europe before segregation crushed her career back home. "This room isn't much, but it's yours for as long as you need it." Lydia surveyed the space. A twin bed pushed against one wall, a small dresser with peeling veneer, a rocking chair by the window that overlooked a concrete courtyard. The wallpaper, once floral and cheerful, had faded to ghostly outlines of what had been. "It's perfect," Lydia whispered, one hand resting on her growing belly. At 5 months, there was no hiding the pregnancy anymore. "I don't know how to thank you." Miss Ella's weathered hand patted Lydia's shoulder. "You'll thank me by proving that man wrong, by raising these babies to be strong and proud." She moved to a cardboard box in the corner. "Church ladies sent these over. Not much, but it's a start." Together, they unpacked donated baby clothes, tiny onesies, miniature socks, secondhand blankets, each item a testament to kindness, but also a reminder of how unprepared Lydia was for what lay ahead. "You don't need him," Miss Ella stated firmly, folding a yellow blanket with practiced hands. "Men like Jonathan Cartwright think they can buy and discard people like us. But you have something he never will. Talent that comes from the soul and heart that's been tested by fire." The following morning, Lydia dressed carefully for an interview at Starlight Records. Her one decent maternity dress, navy blue with white piping, had been ironed meticulously. Her portfolio contained recordings from her performances at small Harlem venues, reviews from local papers that had called her a voice that channels both pain and transcendence. The receptionist smiled when Lydia entered, but the smile faltered when her gaze dropped to Lydia's protruding belly. "Ms. Washington? Mr. Phillips will see you now." The office was sleek, platinum records lining the walls, a view of Midtown that made Manhattan seem like a playground for the privileged. Terrence Phillips, A&R director, rose halfway from his chair, gesturing for Lydia to sit. "Your demo was impressive," he began, not quite meeting her eyes. "Raw talent, emotional range, but I notice your circumstances have changed since the recording." Lydia sat straighter. "My pregnancy doesn't affect my voice. If anything, it's added depth to my interpretation." Phillips shuffled papers on his desk. "The industry is image-conscious, Ms. Washington. Our artists tour extensively, perform late nights. With a baby, I can make arrangements. My schedule can... I'm sorry, but we need artists who can commit 100%. His tone grew kinder, patronizing. "Perhaps try again in a few years when your situation is more stable." Outside the imposing building, Lydia leaned against a wall, fighting tears. It was the third rejection this week. Each interview following the same pattern: initial interest in her voice, then dismissal once they realized she was pregnant. Single, black, a trifecta of complications for an industry looking for marketable commodities, not real artists with real lives. By her 6th month of pregnancy, Lydia had secured a position as a receptionist at a medical clinic in Washington Heights. Dr. Rosenberg, an older physician who had weathered his own share of discrimination decades earlier, hired her despite, or perhaps because of, her visible pregnancy. "Patients will see you and know this is a place of compassion," he had said simply. "Your voice on the phone is professional and warm. That's what matters here." The salary barely covered essentials, but the job came with health insurance, crucial for the twins' impending arrival. Between answering phones and filing medical records, Lydia studied dog-eared books on music business borrowed from the library, contracts, copyright law, publishing rights. Each page a weapon in an arsenal she was slowly building. Nights and weekends brought a different kind of work. Miss Ella had connections to underground jazz clubs, speakeasies of a different era, where Lydia could perform for cash, no questions asked about her growing belly or lack of paperwork. "Baby, you sing like you've lived 3 lifetimes of heartbreak," the owner of the Velvet Note told her after a particularly powerful performance. "These fancy record label folks don't know what they're missing." On a rare Saturday morning off, Lydia took the subway to Upper East Side, where wealthy families lived in limestone townhouses with pristine stoops. A discreet agency had connected her with families needing house cleaning. The irony wasn't lost on her, that she might scrub the bathrooms of people in Jonathan's social circle, people who would never imagine that the pregnant cleaning lady had once been embraced as an exotic diversion by one of their own. The Whitmore's townhouse was immaculate even before she cleaned it, a showcase of privilege rather than a lived-in home. Family photographs lined the hallway, smiling parents with perfect children at beaches, ski resorts, European landmarks. lives untroubled by concerns of survival. As Lydia polished the marble bathroom counters, she caught her reflection in the gilt-edged mirror. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back severely. Her Cartwright Hotel t-shirt, a cruel souvenir from Jonathan's corporate events, stretched tight over her belly. The contrast between her reflection and the photos of carefree, wealthy families was stark enough to take her breath away. That evening back at Miss Ella's, Lydia found herself sleepless despite bone-deep exhaustion. 3:30 in the morning found her at the kitchen table, a single lamp illuminating the music business textbook she'd checked out repeatedly from the library. Rights reversion clauses, digital distribution models, publishing agreements, each concept highlighter marked, annotated in margins with her neat handwriting. "Building your arsenal?" Miss Ella asked, appearing in her robe, placing a mug of herbal tea before Lydia. "Knowledge is the only weapon they can't take from me," Lydia replied, stretching her aching back. "Jonathan's building his empire with family money. I'll build mine with what's in here." She tapped her temple. "And here," Miss Ella added, placing a hand over Lydia's heart. "Don't forget that part." At 32 weeks, Lydia's doctor expressed concern about her exhaustion level, her blood pressure rising dangerously. "Twins are higher risk already. Working 3 jobs isn't sustainable. You need rest." But rest was a luxury Lydia couldn't afford. Not with hospital bills looming, not with 2 babies who would need everything she couldn't yet provide. On a Thursday evening, after her shift at Dr. Rosenberg's office, Lydia dragged herself to the Blue Note, a small jazz club in Greenwich Village that paid performers in cash at the end of each night. Her pregnancy now made standing for full sets impossible, so the owner had placed a stool on stage for her, a small kindness that brought tears to her eyes the first time. Her set that night was raw, emotional, standards interspersed with original compositions about resilience, about rising despite circumstances. The sparse weeknight crowd included the usual assortment of jazz enthusiasts, NYU students seeking authenticity, and a few industry people slumming it away from Midtown's polished venues. As she finished "God Bless the Child," a holiday number that felt autobiographical now, Lydia noticed a well-dressed man watching intently from the back. Unlike the others, he wasn't drinking, wasn't chatting with companions. His focus was absolute, clinical almost. After her set, while packing up her sheet music, she felt rather than saw his approach. "Your interpretation of Holiday was the most honest I've heard in years," he said, extending his hand. Malcolm Reed, Authentic Talent Agency. Lydia had heard of Reed, known for representing jazz and soul artists who operated outside mainstream labels, artists with distinctive voices and backstories that added depth to their performances. "Your voice has something most lack, lived experience," he continued. "I'd like to discuss representation." Hope fluttered in Lydia's chest. Dangerous, unwelcome. "I'm not exactly marketable right now," she said, gesturing to her belly. Reed's eyes held no judgment. Nina Simone wasn't marketable by conventional standards either. Neither was Billy. True artistry transcends packaging. They spoke for an hour, Reed outlining a vision for building her career gradually, through carefully chosen venues and authentic recordings that would showcase her voice without compromising its raw emotion. "I can't promise fame or fortune," he concluded, "but I can promise respect for your artistry and your circumstances." It was the first door that hadn't slammed shut at the sight of her pregnancy. A small opening, perhaps, but one that might widen with time. The following weekend, walking past a newsstand near Central Park, Lydia stopped cold at the sight of Jonathan's face on the cover of New York Magazine. He stood smiling broadly beside a willowy blonde woman wearing an enormous diamond ring. The headline read, "Merger of Dynasties. Cartwright and Richardson unite in heirs engagement." Lydia purchased the magazine with shaking hands, reading the article on a park bench. The piece gushed about the perfect pairing of Hotel Empire heirs, about their shared backgrounds of privilege and pedigree, about wedding plans at the Richardson estate in the Hamptons. Jonathan Cartwright III represents the 5th generation of the Hotel dynasty, the article stated. while his fiancée, Elizabeth Richardson, brings not only beauty and breeding but the strategic advantage of merging competing hotel brands under one family banner. A photo spread showed Jonathan and Elizabeth at charity galas, at polo matches, emerging from expensive restaurants. His arm possessively around her waist, her pedigree apparently worthy of the dynasty he was so desperate to protect. That evening, Miss Ella found Lydia on the floor of her small room, the crumpled magazine beside her, tears streaming unchecked. "He's marrying his perfect match," Lydia whispered, "while I'm cleaning houses and singing for tips." Miss Ella gently took the magazine, glanced at the cover, then deliberately tossed it in the trash. "That man is building his empire with inherited privilege and calculated marriages. You'll build yours with genuine talent and hard work." She helped Lydia to her feet. "Which foundation do you think will last longer?" Later that night, Lydia lay awake, her hands resting on her active belly where her daughters performed their nightly acrobatics. "He's building his world with his family's money and name," she whispered to them. "We'll build ours with talent and determination, and one day everyone will know our names, not his." The magazine with Jonathan's smiling face would eventually yellow and be forgotten, while 15 years later, it would be Lydia's face gracing the cover of Forbes as the queen of the music industry. The magazine with Jonathan's smiling face would eventually yellow and be forgotten, while 15 years later, it would be Lydia's face gracing the cover of Forbes as the queen of the music industry. Rain pounded against the hospital windows as Lydia gripped Miss Ella's weathered hand, her body racked with another contraction. 26 hours of labor had left her exhausted, her hospital gown soaked with sweat, dark curls plastered to her forehead. "Almost there, Ms. Washington," the doctor encouraged from the foot of the bed. "I can see the first baby's head. One more big push." Lydia summoned strength she didn't know she possessed, bearing down with a primal cry that echoed through the delivery room. Seconds later, a sharp, indignant wail filled the air. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, squirming body. "And she's got quite a set of lungs on her." Before Lydia could fully process the miracle of her first daughter's arrival, another contraction gripped her. Miss Ella dabbed her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement. "You can do this, baby. One more time, bring that other little songbird into the world." 7 minutes later, the second twin announced her arrival with a cry as powerful as her sister's. The delivery room burst into activity as nurses cleaned and weighed the newborns, wrapping them in identical hospital blankets. "6 pounds each," the nurse said, placing the twins in Lydia's trembling arms. "Perfect little girls." Exhausted but radiant, Lydia gazed down at her daughters. Through her tears, she noticed something striking. Identical pairs of bright green eyes staring back at her with unfocused newborn intensity. "Those eyes," Miss Ella whispered, leaning closer. "They're just like his," Lydia finished softly. "The Cartwright eyes." The doctor glanced over as he finished his notes. "Green eyes are quite rare in babies of African descent. Strong genetic marker. They're beautiful." "Maya and Zora," Lydia whispered, touching each tiny cheek in turn. "After Maya Angelou and Zora Neale Hurston, strong black women who changed the world with their words." As the first light of dawn broke through rain clouds, illuminating the hospital room in a soft golden glow, Lydia made a silent promise to her daughters. These Cartwright eyes would see a different world than Jonathan had envisioned, one where their mother had forged her own path without his name or money. The return to Miss Ella's modest home presented a stark reality check. The back room now contained a borrowed crib wedged beside Lydia's single bed, leaving barely enough space to walk. Medical bills formed an intimidating stack on the dresser, the final tally far exceeding what her limited insurance would cover. Nights became an endless cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and brief moments of sleep snatched between the twins' alternating cries. Lydia developed a system: study music contracts while nursing one baby, memorize publishing rights details while burping the other, Review digital distribution models during the rare moments both girls slept simultaneously. 3 weeks after giving birth, Lydia returned to her receptionist position, dark circles under her eyes concealed with drugstore makeup, her professional voice betraying none of the bone-deep exhaustion she felt. "You're back already?" Dr. Rosenberg asked, concern evident in his voice. "The twins are so young." "Miss Ella is watching them," Lydia explained, organizing patient files with practiced efficiency. "We need the income." Dr. Rosenberg nodded, understanding the reality of her situation. "If you need to pump milk during the day, use my private office. And if the girls get sick, bring them in. No charge." Saturday mornings found Lydia cleaning the homes of Manhattan's elite, now with twin carriers strapped to her chest and back, the babies sleeping against her as she scrubbed and polished evidence of wealth she could only imagine. She moved mechanically through marble bathrooms and chef's kitchens, trying not to dwell on the jarring contrast between these spaces and the crowded room where her daughters would grow up. By evening, Miss Ella would take the exhausted infants while Lydia performed at whatever venue would pay her in cash. Her voice, already rich before pregnancy, had developed a depth and emotional resonance that stopped conversations mid-sentence. Pain and resilience had transformed her sound into something extraordinary, raw, authentic, impossible to ignore. "Your singing has changed," Marcus Jones, a producer who frequented the Blue Note, told her after a particularly moving performance. "Motherhood has deepened something in you. You're not just singing notes anymore. You're telling stories with every breath." As the twins reached 6 months, Lydia's schedule had become a carefully orchestrated symphony of obligations. Receptionist by day, performer by night, with cleaning jobs wedged in between. 3 separate incomes barely covered the essentials, leaving nothing for savings. Each month was a tightrope walk over financial disaster, one unexpected expense away from catastrophe. The babies developed distinct personalities despite their identical appearances. Maya was observant and analytical, studying everything with intense concentration. Zora was expressive and responsive to music, her tiny body swaying whenever Lydia sang or played recordings of jazz standards. One evening at the Blue Note, after a set that had left the audience in emotional ruins, Lydia noticed a distinguished older man watching from a corner table. Unlike the typical patrons, he didn't drink, didn't chat with companions. His focus remained entirely on her performance, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound book. As she packed up her sheet music, he approached with measured steps. "Marcus Jones," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "I produce for Authentic Records. Your voice tonight? It was extraordinary." Lydia had heard of Jones, a veteran producer known for discovering authentic talent, someone who valued artistic integrity over commercial appeal. "I have a small studio in Brooklyn," he continued. "Nothing fancy but good equipment. I'd like to record some tracks with you." Hope flickered dangerously in Lydia's chest. She'd learned to distrust hope. It had betrayed her too many times. "I have 6-month-old twins," she said bluntly, watching for his reaction. "They come with me everywhere." Marcus smiled, crow's feet deepening around kind eyes. "My studio has a playpen for my grandkids. Music should be part of children's lives from the beginning." He handed her a business card. "No promises about where it leads, but your voice deserves to be recorded properly." 2 weeks later, Lydia found herself in Marcus's Brooklyn studio, a converted warehouse space with soundproofed walls covered in acoustic panels. True to his word, a playpen had been set up in the corner of the control room where the twins now slept peacefully, lulled by the gentle hum of equipment. "This song," Marcus said, reviewing her handwritten music sheets, "it's powerful. Did you compose it yourself?" Lydia nodded. "Stronger Foundations is about building something lasting from ruins." "Let's capture it while the emotion is still raw," Marcus suggested, adjusting microphone settings. "First take is often the most honest." As Lydia sang, pouring every ounce of her journey into each note, she forgot about the cramped room at Miss Ella's, forgot about scrubbing other people's floors, forgot about the man who had discarded her as inadequate. For those 4 minutes, she existed purely as artist and mother, the two identities that now defined her completely. When the final note faded, she opened her eyes to find Marcus staring at her through the glass, an expression of stunned reverence on his face. He pressed the intercom button. "That wasn't just singing," he said, voice slightly hoarse. "That was testimony." They recorded through the night, taking breaks only when the twins needed feeding or changing. By dawn, they had captured 5 original compositions, each one chronicling different aspects of Lydia's journey from rejection to resilience. "I know someone who needs to hear these," Marcus said as they listened to the rough cuts. "Etta Williams just started her own independent label. She's looking for authentic voices, artists with something real to say." Lydia tried to temper her expectations. The music industry had slammed too many doors in her face for her to believe in easy openings. "Do what you think is best," she said, gathering her sleeping daughters. "But I've learned not to count on maybes." 3 weeks passed with no word from Marcus. Lydia continued her grueling schedule, too busy surviving to dwell on disappointment. Then, one Tuesday evening, her phone rang as she was bathing the twins in the kitchen sink. "Lydia Washington?" A rich, authoritative female voice came through the line. "This is Etta Williams. Marcus Jones shared your recordings with me. I need to meet you and those babies who are cooing in the background." 2 days later, Lydia found herself in the modest offices of Harmony Soul Records, a newly established independent label operating out of a converted brownstone in Brooklyn. The twins gurgled happily in their double stroller as Etta Williams, a legendary soul singer whose career spanned 4 decades, studied Lydia with penetrating eyes. "Honey, your voice tells stories that can't be taught," Etta said, her own voice carrying the smoky resonance of countless performances. "Pain, strength, resilience, it's all there. But Marcus tells me you've got business sense too." "I've been studying the industry," Lydia admitted. "Contract law, publishing rights, digital distribution." Etta's eyebrows rose appreciatively. "Smart woman. This business eats artists alive when they don't understand the machinery behind the music." She leaned forward. "I'm offering you 2 things, a recording contract for an EP and a job in our administrative office." "A job?" Lydia repeated, stunned. 3 days a week, decent salary, health insurance. You'll learn the business from the inside while developing your music." Etta glanced at the twins. "Bring them. I grew up in recording studios. Musicians are made, not born." For the first time in a year, Lydia felt something unfamiliar blossom in her chest. Not desperate hope, but genuine possibility. That night, as she fed the twins in Miss Ella's kitchen, she allowed herself to imagine a different future than the one Jonathan had predicted for her. Not as a forgotten waitress in Los Angeles, but as an artist and businesswoman building her own legacy. "Those babies are your strength, not your limitation," Miss Ella observed, watching Lydia efficiently burp Maya while feeding Zora. "They gave you something to fight for beyond yourself." Within a month, Lydia had settled into her role at Harmony Soul Records, reorganizing their chaotic filing system, streamlining their contract templates, introducing digital tracking for royalty payments. The twins became fixtures in the office, a playpen established in the corner of the administrative area, their presence bringing unexpected joy to the creative environment. In the evenings, after office hours, Lydia recorded her EP, the twins often watching wide-eyed from their carriers as their mother's voice filled the studio. The green eyes they had inherited from Jonathan seemed to absorb everything, missing nothing. "Your daughters have music in their souls already," Etta commented, watching the babies sway rhythmically to a playback. "Look how they respond to the changes in tempo." As she rocked her daughters to sleep that night, Lydia whispered promises against their soft curls. "We're building something they said we couldn't build. Our own foundation, our own legacy." While cradling her babies after the recording session, Lydia didn't know that this simple demo would reach the hands of Etta Williams. the sole legend who would change her life forever and open doors to an empire that would one day engulf the Cartwrights. While cradling her babies after the recording session, Lydia didn't know that this simple demo would reach the hands of Etta Williams, the sole legend who would change her life forever and open doors to an empire that would one day engulf the Cartwrights. 3 months passed in a blur of diaper changes, late-night feedings, and the steady rhythm of Lydia's new routine at Harmony Soul Records. The twins grew stronger each day, their identical green eyes, those unmistakable Cartwright eyes, becoming more alert and curious about the world around them. On a crisp autumn morning, Lydia arrived at the office to find Etta Williams standing by the reception desk, holding a CD with Lydia's name scrawled across it in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. "Your demo," Etta said without preamble, her voice carrying the weight of decades in the industry. "Marcus sent it to me weeks ago. I've been listening to it every night." Lydia shifted the twin carrier on her hip, heart suddenly racing. "And? It's extraordinary." Etta's eyes, lined with the wisdom of countless performances, held Lydia's gaze. "Your voice tells stories that most artists spend decades trying to capture. That kind of authentic pain and resilience, it can't be manufactured." Lydia swallowed hard, uncertain whether to hope or guard herself against another disappointment. "I'm offering you a contract," Etta continued. "Not just for an EP, but also a position here at the label. Administrative work to start. We need someone who understands both the creative and business sides. The industry is changing, and artists who don't understand contracts end up with nothing but memories." "A real job?" Lydia whispered, thinking of the stack of bills waiting at Miss Ella's house, the medical expenses still unpaid, the precarious existence she'd been navigating. Salary, benefits, flexible hours so you can manage these beautiful babies. Etta glanced at the twins, who were studying her with identical curious expressions. "Bring them. I grew up in studios, surrounded by music and musicians. Children should hear music from birth." That evening, as Lydia signed the contract with trembling fingers, she felt something shift inside her, a foundation stone being laid for something she couldn't yet envision, but somehow knew would be substantial. "This is just the beginning," Etta said, pouring 2 glasses of champagne to celebrate. "You have something special, Lydia Washington, and I don't just mean your voice." Within weeks, Lydia had established herself as an indispensable presence at Harmony Soul Records. Her natural organizational abilities transformed the label's chaotic filing system into an efficient operation. Between answering phones and coordinating schedules, she absorbed everything around her: how deals were structured, which contract clauses protected artists, how distribution channels were evolving in the digital age. The twins became fixtures at the office, a playpen established in the corner where they observed the bustling creative environment with those striking green eyes. Artists and executives alike stopped to coo at them, marveling at their identical features and the way they seemed to respond to musical patterns. "Those babies have perfect pitch," remarked a veteran jazz pianist after watching them react to a chord progression. "They move differently to major and minor keys. Watch them. They're musicians already." One afternoon, 3 months into her employment, Lydia was organizing a stack of contracts when she overheard an increasingly heated phone conversation from Etta's office. "What do you mean he's pulling out? The venue is booked. Sponsors are confirmed." Etta's voice carried through the thin walls. When she emerged, her expression was thunderous. "Damien canceled. Stomach flu, supposedly, though I suspect it's more about that offer from Atlantic." Lydia glanced at the calendar on her desk, immediately understanding the implications. The showcase event scheduled for that weekend was critical. Potential investors and distribution partners would be attending, expecting to see Harmony's marquee artist perform. "What about Marcel?" Lydia suggested, referring to another vocalist on the label. "On tour in Europe," Etta sighed, sinking into a chair. "We've got 48 hours to find a replacement or cancel an event that cost us $15,000 non-refundable to organize." Lydia took a deep breath, an idea forming. What if, instead of one headliner, we showcase 3 new artists in a collaborative set? Isaiah's jazz quartet, Sophia's spoken word, and Tyler's acoustic soul, structured as a journey through the evolution of black music. Etta looked up sharply, studying Lydia with newfound interest. That's actually brilliant. Each gets 20 minutes, but we frame it as an intentional showcase rather than a substitution. I can coordinate their rehearsal tomorrow, Lydia continued, confidence building. We'll need to adjust the promotional materials, but framing it as a special collaborative event might actually generate more buzz than a standard performance. By the time the event arrived, Lydia had not only salvaged the showcase but transformed it into something unexpected and compelling. The investors were impressed by the innovative format. 3 artists signed new distribution deals, and Harmony Soul Records demonstrated its adaptability and vision. Afterward, Etta found Lydia in the small kitchenette, preparing bottles for the twins who had slept through most of the event in a back room, watched over by an intern. "You saved more than an event tonight," Etta said, leaning against the counter. "You showed me something I've been looking for, someone who understands both the art and the business, someone who sees solutions where others see problems." She studied Lydia thoughtfully. "You have an ear for business beyond musical talent." Lydia smiled, testing the temperature of formula against her wrist. "I've been studying. Every night after the girls sleep, I read about publishing rights, digital distribution models, contract law." "Why?" Etta asked, genuinely curious. Lydia's expression hardened slightly. "Because I never want to be at anyone's mercy again. Knowledge is power, especially in this industry." In the months that followed, Lydia's role at Harmony Soul evolved beyond administrative tasks. Etta began inviting her to strategic meetings, valuing her perspective on everything from artist development to digital marketing. The EP they recorded showcased Lydia's powerful vocals on 5 original compositions, each one documenting different aspects of her journey. "We'll release it next month," Etta announced one afternoon, sliding the final master across her desk. "These songs deserve to be heard." The day Lydia received her first significant paycheck, she stood frozen in the small bathroom at Harmony Soul, staring at the figure that represented stability she hadn't known in years. That evening, she and Miss Ella sat at the kitchen table poring over apartment listings. "This one," Miss Ella pointed to a modest 2-bedroom in Washington Heights. "Decent neighborhood, good schools nearby, and close enough to the subway for your commute." Lydia traced the outline of the apartment in the photograph, trying to imagine her daughters having their own room, a real kitchen, windows that faced something other than a concrete wall. "It's perfect." The following weekend, Lydia signed the lease on the apartment, her hands trembling slightly as she completed the paperwork. The building wasn't fancy, a pre-war structure with creaky elevators and radiators that clanged in winter, but it was clean, safe, and now it was theirs. Moving day brought a parade of helpers from Harmony Soul, interns carrying boxes, the studio engineer assembling cribs, Etta herself directing traffic with the authority of a symphony conductor. By evening, the small apartment had transformed from empty rooms to the beginning of a home. After everyone left, Lydia stood in the empty living room, watching Maya and Zora take their first unsteady steps across the worn hardwood floors. Their identical faces lit with delight at the space to explore. Their green eyes, Jonathan's eyes, bright with curiosity. "Our first real home," Lydia whispered, her voice catching. She thought of Jonathan's penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the casual luxury he had taken for granted. This modest apartment with its second-hand furniture and patched walls couldn't compare in grandeur, but it represented something Jonathan would never understand: independence earned through perseverance. That night, after tucking the twins into their new cribs, Lydia sat by the window overlooking the street below. Across the city, Jonathan Cartwright III was likely attending some gala or charity event, surrounded by the trappings of inherited wealth, building his future on a foundation laid by generations before him. "But we're building too," she whispered to her sleeping daughters. Brick by brick, note by note. The following week brought another milestone, the release of Lydia's EP, Foundations. Though distribution was limited to digital platforms and select independent record stores, the critical response was immediate and enthusiastic. Washington's voice carries the raw authenticity of lived experience, wrote an influential music blogger. These aren't songs written in comfortable studios by privileged artists, they're testimonies forged in the crucible of genuine struggle. At Harmony Soul's offices, a small celebration marked the release. Etta raised a toast, her eyes reflecting pride and something else, a recognition of kindred spirits. To Lydia Washington, whose voice will change this industry, and whose business mind might just revolutionize it. Later that evening, back in their new apartment, Lydia bathed the twins in the small tub, marveling at how quickly they were growing. At 11 months, their personalities were emerging distinctly. Maya methodical and observant, Zora expressive and bold. Both showed remarkable responsiveness to music, their little bodies swaying instinctively to rhythms, their hands reaching toward any instrument within view. As she dried and dressed them, Lydia found herself studying their features, the delicate curve of their noses, the shape of their eyes so unmistakably like Jonathan's. These precious girls carried his genetic legacy, but they would be raised with values he couldn't comprehend: perseverance, empathy, the dignity of work. That night, as rain tapped against the windows of their new home, Lydia sang her daughters to sleep with one of the songs from her EP, a lullaby of promise and protection. When their breathing deepened into the rhythm of sleep, she stood watching them, overwhelmed by fierce love and determination. "We're going to build something extraordinary," she whispered to their sleeping forms, something he could never imagine. While arranging their new apartment, Lydia didn't imagine that in just 5 years she would be purchasing an entire building to house her own record label, building the empire that would one day confront Jonathan's. While arranging their new apartment, Lydia didn't imagine that in just 5 years she would be purchasing an entire building to house her own record label, building the empire that would one day confront Jonathan's. 3 years passed in a steady rhythm of growth and transformation. Lydia, now 26, had evolved from the frightened young woman clutching a positive pregnancy test to a confident executive at Etta Williams' label. Her tailored blazer, modest but well cut, replaced the threadbare clothes of her struggling days as she walked into the main conference room where Harmony Soul's leadership team had gathered for an important announcement. The twins, now 3 years old, played quietly in the corner of the room, their identical features drawing admiring glances from staff members. Maya's small fingers danced across a toy piano with surprising coordination, while Zora hummed along, instinctively finding harmonies that children her age shouldn't comprehend. "They're extraordinary," whispered Marcus Jones, now Harmony's head of A&R, nodding toward the girls. "Musical ability like that doesn't just happen." Lydia smiled, watching her daughters with quiet pride. They hear music differently. It's not just sound to them, it's language. Etta Williams entered the room with her characteristic purposeful stride, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant knot. At 67, she remained a formidable presence, though recent health challenges had left her more reflective than usual. "Thank you all for coming," Etta began, scanning the faces of the team she'd assembled over the years. "After much consideration, I've decided it's time for me to step back. I've built my legacy over 4 decades in this business. Now it's time for you to build yours." Murmurs rippled through the room as Etta continued. "Monarch Media has offered to purchase Harmony Soul Records. The deal includes our catalog, our current roster, and the digital distribution channel we established 2 years ago." Lydia felt a small jolt of alarm at the mention of the distribution channel, the innovative platform she'd helped develop, which had revolutionized how independent artists reached audiences directly, bypassing traditional gatekeepers. After the meeting dispersed, Etta beckoned Lydia to her office, closing the door behind them. "You look troubled. Etta observed, settling into her chair. The distribution platform, Lydia said, choosing her words carefully. Monarch doesn't understand its potential. They see it as an afterthought, not the future. Etta nodded slowly. I had the same thought. That's why I've structured the deal to separate it from the main acquisition. They're offering a modest amount for it. They don't recognize its value. Because they're still thinking in physical units and radio plays, Lydia said, her mind racing. They don't see how streaming is changing everything. No, they don't. Etta leaned forward, her gaze intent. But you do. You've been telling me for 2 years that digital distribution is where independent artists will find true autonomy. It is, Lydia affirmed. The algorithms favor authenticity if you know how to position content correctly. Major labels still think they need million-dollar marketing campaigns, but we've proven that strategic digital placement can be more effective at a fraction of the cost. Then perhaps, Etta said, sliding a folder across her desk, you should be the one to take it forward. Lydia opened the folder to find financial projections, asset valuations, and a proposed structure for spinning off the distribution platform as a separate entity. You want me to buy it? She asked, stunned. I want you to consider it, Etta corrected. Your salary here is decent, but not enough for this purchase. You'd need investors or a bank loan. It would be a risk. Her expression softened. But sometimes we build our most meaningful legacies on the foundation of calculated risks. 2 weeks later, Lydia sat in the sterile office of Empire Bank's commercial division, wearing her one good suit and projecting confidence she wasn't entirely sure she felt. Across the desk, a loan officer reviewed her business plan with an impassive expression. Your projections for digital growth are ambitious, he commented, looking up from the document. They're conservative compared to actual industry trends, Lydia countered, pointing to the data sheets she'd prepared. Streaming revenues increased 68% last year alone. Traditional labels are still operating on outdated models while independent artists are seeking new distribution channels. And you believe your platform provides that alternative? It already does, Lydia replied, sliding over performance metrics from Harmony Soul's digital distribution. We've generated $300,000 in revenue from artists who were rejected by major labels. The platform's algorithm matches content to listener preferences more efficiently than competitors, resulting in higher conversion rates. After what felt like hours of questioning, the banker finally closed his folder. We'll need collateral. My apartment, Lydia said without hesitation, and I have $15,000 in savings. That's not nearly enough for a loan of this size. Then I'll find investors for the remainder, she stated firmly. But I'll maintain controlling interest. When Lydia finally emerged from the bank, she had preliminary approval for 60% of the amount needed, contingent on finding investors for the rest. It wasn't the full victory she'd hoped for, but it was a start. That evening, as she prepared dinner in their modest apartment, the twins played a complex clapping game they'd invented, their perfect coordination, another reminder of their exceptional gifts. Mommy's going to start a business, she told them, setting plates of pasta on their small table. A special company that helps musicians share their songs with the world. Like your songs? Maya asked, her analytical mind always seeking connections. Yes, like my songs, and many other artists who need a chance to be heard. 3 months later, after securing investments from 5 musicians who believed in her vision, Lydia signed the final documents to purchase the distribution platform from Etta. The following week, Harmony Records, named to honor her start with Etta, but distinct enough to forge its own identity, opened in a small office space in Brooklyn. The space was humble, peeling paint on the walls, creaky floorboards, a collection of mismatched furniture donated by supportive friends. But it was hers. A desktop computer, a professional-grade server, and a sign on the door reading Harmony Records marked the official beginning of Lydia's own company. Her first hire was Zoe Chen, a digital marketing specialist whose innovative social media strategies had been deemed too experimental by the major labels where she'd interviewed. They want everything quantifiable and proven, Zoe explained during her interview with Lydia. But digital marketing requires constant evolution. By the time something is proven, it's already becoming obsolete. Exactly, Lydia agreed, impressed by the young woman's vision. We need to anticipate trends, not chase them. For the first 3 months, Harmony Records operated on minimal resources, with Lydia and Zoe handling everything from website maintenance to artist communications. The twins often accompanied her to the office after preschool, a playpen established in the corner where they would draw or play with musical toys while Lydia worked late into the evening. The breakthrough came unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday when 4 young musicians entered the office, their expressions a mixture of dejection and desperate hope. "We've been turned down by every label in the city," explained their lead vocalist, a slender man with intense eyes. "They said our sound is too niche, whatever that means." Lydia recognized the look of rejection, had worn it herself too many times to count. "Let me hear what you've got." As the demo played through the office speakers, she recognized immediately what the major labels had missed. Authentic emotional resonance wrapped in innovative sound structures that didn't fit neatly into commercial categories. "They're looking in the wrong places," she told the band after the track finished. "Your audience isn't in traditional venues, it's online, in communities of listeners tired of manufactured sounds." "But how do we reach them?" the guitarist asked. "We've posted our music everywhere." "Not strategically," Lydia explained, already formulating a plan. "The internet isn't just a platform, it's your stage. But you need to understand its architecture, its algorithms, how content flows from creator to consumer." That night, after putting the twins to bed, Lydia sat at her small desk outlining a revolutionary approach for the band. While traditional labels would allocate 80% of resources to physical distribution and mainstream promotion, Harmony would invert the model. 80% digital, focused on strategic placement in emerging platforms and targeted engagement with online communities. "It's the future that nobody's seeing yet," she explained to the band when they signed their contract the following day. "Major labels are fighting streaming because it threatens their control. We're embracing it because it democratizes distribution." For 6 weeks, Lydia and Zoe executed their strategy with meticulous precision. They identified micro-influencers in specific digital communities, created content strategies that encouraged organic sharing, and utilized data analytics to refine targeting in real time. Late one night, as Lydia analyzed engagement metrics while the twins slept on the office sofa, the first signs of success appeared. The band's lead single had been added to a popular playlist, triggering a cascade of algorithmic recommendations across the platform. By morning, streaming numbers had increased 300%. Within a week, the song had entered the platform's trending charts, generating industry buzz about this overnight success that had seemingly emerged from nowhere. "It wasn't luck," Lydia explained to a music blogger who called for insight. "It was strategic understanding of how digital content flows in the modern ecosystem." As the song continued its climb, more artists began approaching Harmony Records, drawn by its innovative approach and artist-friendly contracts. Lydia's phone rang constantly with industry professionals curious about this new boutique label disrupting traditional models. The evening their first signed band's song reached 1 million streams. Lydia danced around the office with the twins, all 3 spinning in joyous circles as the track played through speakers. "Mommy's building something big for us," she told her daughters, their identical green eyes shining with excitement even if they couldn't fully comprehend the significance. Later that night, tucking the girls into bed in their small apartment, Lydia felt a profound sense of vindication. Jonathan had discarded her as inconsequential, a temporary diversion unworthy of his dynasty. Yet here she was, creating something meaningful, something that would grow and evolve in ways he couldn't imagine with his inherited privilege and narrow vision. "We're just getting started," she whispered to her sleeping daughters. As Harmony Records grew from its humble beginnings, Lydia remained focused on the future rather than the past. Each success wasn't about proving Jonathan wrong, it was about proving herself right. The path forward wasn't about revenge, but about building something authentic and sustainable for her daughters and the artists who trusted her vision. While celebrating Harmony Records' first major success, Lydia didn't know that the recommendation algorithm that had just propelled the band's song to the top would be the same technology that, in 7 years, she would purchase and use to revolutionize the industry, putting her on a direct collision course with Cartwright interests. While celebrating Harmony Records' first major success, Lydia didn't know that the recommendation algorithm that had just propelled the band's song to the top would be the same technology that, in 7 years, she would purchase and use to revolutionize the industry, putting her on a direct collision course with Cartwright interests. 4 years passed like a symphony gathering momentum. Lydia Washington, now 30, strode through the lobby of Harmony Records headquarters, an entire converted warehouse in Brooklyn that housed her expanding company. Gone were the days of peeling paint and borrowed furniture. Polished concrete floors and modern glass partitions now defined the space where 50 employees worked to discover and promote authentic musical talent. The receptionist smiled as Lydia passed. "The team from Billboard is waiting in the conference room, Ms. Washington." "Thank you, Diane. And the girls?" "In the studio with Raphael. He's showing them chord progressions on the baby grand." Lydia nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. At 7, the twins had developed from musically inclined toddlers into genuine prodigies. Maya's piano playing had advanced to pieces that children twice her age struggled with, while Zora's affinity for the cello had emerged when a visiting string quartet had left the instrument unattended, and she had picked it up, somehow knowing instinctively how to draw rich tones from its strings. In her office, Lydia reviewed the quarterly reports before meeting with the press. Harmony Records had expanded beyond its original digital distribution focus to become a respected independent label with an artist roster that larger companies increasingly tried to poach. Their innovative contracts, offering higher royalty percentages and creative control in exchange for digital-first strategies, had disrupted traditional industry models enough that several major labels were scrambling to replicate their approach. After the Billboard interview, Lydia made her way to the in-house studio where the twins were finishing their impromptu music lesson. Raphael, Harmony's most successful jazz pianist, was watching with undisguised awe as Maya played a complex piece he had just demonstrated. "It's not normal," he whispered as Lydia entered. "I've taught at Juilliard. I've never seen a child this age grasp musical theory so intuitively." "We need to discuss formal training," Lydia acknowledged, watching her daughters. Their matching dark curls and striking green eyes, Jonathan's eyes, were the only obvious reminder of their biological father. In every other way, they were becoming their own people, shaped by an environment of creativity and determination rather than privilege and entitlement. That evening, after researching music schools and programs, Lydia made a decision that would significantly shape the twins' future. The prestigious Dalton School, with its exceptional music program and academic rigor, would provide opportunities she had never had access to. "It's expensive," she admitted to herself, reviewing the tuition figures, "but they deserve every advantage." The irony wasn't lost on her. Jonathan had deemed her unworthy of the Cartwright dynasty partly because of her lack of proper education. Now she would ensure their daughters received the finest education available, earned through her own success rather than inherited privilege. The twins were accepted immediately after their audition and assessment, the admissions director barely containing her excitement at discovering such talent. "We occasionally receive legacy students with significant donations," she told Lydia privately, "but we treasure finding genuine gifts like your daughters possess." As Maya and Zora settled into their new school, Lydia expanded Harmony's influence, opening a small satellite office in Los Angeles to better serve their growing roster of West Coast artists. The company's unique approach to artist development and digital distribution had created a recognizable brand in the industry. Harmony artists were known for authentic voices and innovative sounds that connected deeply with audiences. One chilly November evening, Lydia attended a charity gala for the New York Children's Hospital. As the founder of a successful company, she had joined the donor circle that supported the hospital's music therapy program. The elegant ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was filled with New York's elite, old money mingling with new, influence measured in connections as much as dollars. "Another gin and tonic, please," she requested at the bar, scanning the room as she waited. Her simple black dress, a Vera Wang she'd purchased to mark Harmony's 5th anniversary, was elegant without being ostentatious. "Make that 2, came a deep voice beside her. "Unless you'd prefer champagne?" Lydia turned to find herself looking into the warm brown eyes of a tall black man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo. His smile was genuine, lacking the practiced charm she'd grown accustomed to from industry executives. "Dr. James Jones," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Cardiothoracic surgery. Lydia Washington, Harmony Records." "I know," he replied, his smile widening. "My niece plays your Melissa Carter album constantly. You're changing how independent artists reach audiences." Their conversation flowed easily, moving from music to medicine, from business challenges to personal philosophies. Unlike the men Lydia occasionally dated, most either intimidated by her success or attempting to leverage it, James seemed completely comfortable in his own accomplishments. "I should circulate," Lydia said reluctantly after 30 minutes of conversation that felt like 5. "I'm supposed to be networking." "Of course," James nodded, "though I'd like to continue our discussion sometime. Perhaps dinner?" For the first time since Jonathan, Lydia felt a flutter of genuine interest. "I'd like that. But you should know, I have 7-year-old twins. They're my priority." "As they should be," James replied without hesitation. "I'd be honored to meet them whenever you're comfortable with that." 2 weeks later, Lydia faced her first major crisis at Harmony, when their most profitable artist, Devin Michaels, was offered a massive contract by Universal Music Group. The executive team gathered in the conference room, strategies flying. "We can't match this offer financially," admitted Thomas, their CFO. "They're offering $2 million upfront plus tour support and international marketing." "Then we don't compete on money," Lydia stated firmly. "We compete where we're strongest: artist autonomy and strategic innovation." Through the night, Lydia and her team developed a revolutionary counter-proposal, a hybrid model that would grant Devin unprecedented creative control, higher royalty percentages, ownership of his master recordings, and a strategic partnership structure that would make him a part owner in his own brand rather than merely a talent under contract. "We're not just offering a different contract," Lydia explained when presenting the proposal to Devin. "We're offering a different relationship with the industry itself. They see you as product. We see you as partner." When Devin chose to remain with Harmony, the industry took notice. Music business publications featured analyses of the innovative contract structure, and other artists began inquiring about similar arrangements. Meanwhile, Lydia's personal life blossomed alongside her professional success. After several dinner dates, James asked to meet the twins. Lydia arranged a casual Sunday brunch at their favorite cafe, watching carefully as her daughters interacted with this man who was becoming increasingly important to her. "You're a heart doctor?" Maya asked, her analytical mind immediately focused on understanding his role. "I am," James confirmed. "I help fix hearts that aren't working properly." "Like when Mommy's heart was broken?" Zora questioned innocently, causing Lydia to nearly choke on her coffee. James handled the moment with gentle grace. Not exactly the same kind of broken heart, but in both cases, healing takes time and care. As they walked through Central Park afterward, the twins ran ahead to the playground while James and Lydia followed at a slower pace. "They're extraordinary," James commented. "Not just their obvious talents, but their perspectives, their questions." "They've been my whole world," Lydia admitted. "After their father, they mentioned him asking about him," James said carefully. "I hope I didn't overstep." No, you were perfect. Lydia watched her daughters on the swings, their identical faces lifted toward the sky. I've never lied to them about him. They know he exists, but chose not to be part of our lives. His catastrophic loss, James said simply, and potentially my immeasurable gain, if you'll all allow me into your lives. Their relationship deepened over the following months. James attended the twins' first school recital, applauding with genuine enthusiasm as Maya performed a Bach prelude and Zora played a cello arrangement that belied her young age. He brought books on human anatomy when Maya expressed curiosity about how bodies work, and spent an entire Saturday helping Zora build a model of a sound wave after she became fascinated with acoustic physics. "Are you going to make our mom cry like our biological father did?" Zora asked bluntly one evening when James came to dinner at their apartment. Lydia froze in the act of serving pasta, but James set down his water glass calmly and knelt to meet Zora at eye level. "No," he said with quiet conviction. "I promise to always treat all three of you with the respect and care you deserve. I can't promise we'll never disagree or that I'll never make mistakes, but I can promise to always be honest, to listen, and to put your well-being first." Maya studied him with those penetrating green eyes. "Our biological father didn't keep his promises." "Then I'll have to work extra hard to show you that some people do," James replied, his voice steady. That night, after the twins were asleep, James presented Lydia with a small bouquet of wildflowers and tickets to a symphony performance the girls had been eager to attend. "This isn't just courting you," he explained. "It's asking properly to be part of all your lives. I'm falling in love with you, Lydia Washington, and I admire the remarkable young women you're raising." As Lydia watched James playing a complex clapping game with her daughters in the living room, teaching them about cardiac rhythms through percussion patterns, she didn't know that across town, Jonathan Cartwright was facing the beginning of his family hotel empire's collapse, a tax scandal that would place him years later vulnerable precisely when she would be in a position of maximum power. As Lydia watched James playing a complex clapping game with her daughters in the living room, teaching them about cardiac rhythms through percussion patterns, she felt something long dormant within her bloom. Here was a man who saw her daughters not as burdens or complications, but as extensions of the woman he was falling in love with. A man whose presence in their lives was based on choice rather than obligation. 3 years later, on a perfect May afternoon, Lydia stood in the private garden of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, her cream silk dress catching the golden light filtering through the cherry blossoms. At 33, she radiated a confidence that came from building a successful company and raising 2 exceptional daughters. Before her stood James, his eyes never leaving hers as they exchanged vows beneath an arch woven with jasmine and roses. "I promise to love not only you," James said, his voice carrying to the small gathering of guests, "but to be a father to Maya and Zora, to support their dreams, to guide them when needed, and to step back when appropriate. I commit myself to our family, the one we have and the one we may build together." In the front row, the twins sat in matching lavender dresses, their 10-year-old faces solemn with the significance of the occasion. When the officiant invited them forward, they rose with perfect synchronization, carrying the rings on a small cushion embroidered with musical notes, a detail they had insisted upon. "Do you, Maya and Zora Washington, welcome James into your family and accept his promise to love and support you?" the officiant asked, adapting the traditional ceremony to include them. "We do," they answered in unison, their identical green eyes, those unmistakable Cartwright eyes, bright with emotion. When Maya and Zora began to play, the garden fell silent. The piece they had composed especially for the wedding wove together elements of jazz, classical, and soul, a musical representation of how their lives had intertwined with James's. Maya's fingers danced across the keyboard of the grand piano that had been delivered that morning, while Zora's cello provided a rich, emotional foundation. The complexity and maturity of the composition left the guests stunned, many wiping away tears at the raw talent displayed by children so young. Miss Ella, now approaching 80 but still regal in a blue suit and matching hat, dabbed at her eyes as she escorted Lydia down the aisle. "Viu?" she whispered in Portuguese, a language she had been teaching the twins. "You built something better than he could ever offer." The reception unfolded beneath white tents on the lawn, jazz quartets playing as guests mingled. Many were artists signed to Harmony Records. Others were colleagues from the industry who had witnessed Lydia's remarkable rise. James's fellow surgeons and medical researchers added an elegant gravity to the gathering, impressed by the creative energy that surrounded his new wife. As twilight softened the garden, Lydia slipped away to the conference room that had been set up in a small pavilion. There, her executive team had gathered for a brief but significant announcement before rejoining the celebration. "I've signed the final papers for our London and Los Angeles offices," she informed them, spreading architectural renderings across the table. "Harmony Records is officially international." Applause erupted among her trusted lieutenants, Zoe Chen, now Global Marketing Director, Marcus Jones, Head of Artist Development, Tomas Rivera, CFO, and 5 others who had grown with the company from its earliest days. "We're expanding at the perfect moment," Tomas noted, pointing to financial projections. "Streaming revenues increased 60% last year alone, and our artist-centric contracts are attracting talent that traditional labels can't keep." Back at the reception, Lydia found James deep in conversation with the twins' music teachers from Dalton School, where both girls had continued to excel not only musically but academically. Their perfect grades matched their musical achievements, their dual gifts creating a buzz in educational circles. "Mrs. Peterson was just telling me about the Juilliard pre-college division program," James explained as Lydia joined them. "She believes Maya and Zora would be exceptional candidates. Their technical abilities already exceed many of our high school students," Mrs. Peterson added. "But more importantly, they possess an emotional intelligence in their playing that can't be taught. It's rare and valuable." Lydia watched her daughters across the lawn, now playing an impromptu duet with one of Harmony's jazz pianists, their concentration absolute despite the festive surroundings. "I want them to have every opportunity I didn't," she said softly. 2 months after the wedding, the newly formed Washington Jones family moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, a home with space for a music room equipped with a baby grand piano and Zora's growing collection of stringed instruments. The girls transferred to Dalton's upper school program while attending weekend classes at Juilliard Pre-College, their schedules carefully balanced to allow time for both rigorous academic study and intensive musical training. James officially adopted the twins on their 11th birthday, though legally they maintained their Washington surname while adding Jones. The family settled into a rhythm of purpose and joy, their home filled with music, medical journals, and the constant hum of Harmony Records business being conducted from Lydia's home office. One crisp September morning, as Lydia reviewed quarterly projections in the conference room at Harmony's Brooklyn headquarters, her assistant interrupted with unusual urgency. "Ms. Washington Jones, I think you should see this." She placed that morning's Wall Street Journal on the table, opened to the business section. The headline read, "Cartwright Holdings faces federal investigation for tax evasion and fraud." Lydia scanned the article dispassionately, absorbing the details. Jonathan Cartwright III, now CEO following his father's retirement, faced allegations of systematic tax fraud involving offshore accounts and falsified business expenses. The Cartwright hotel chain, once the gold standard of luxury accommodations, was struggling under mounting debt and declining occupancy rates. Unlike the younger Lydia, who might have felt vindication, the successful businesswoman she had become saw something else entirely: opportunity. "Contact our acquisition team," she instructed her assistant. "I want a complete analysis of Cartwright Holdings' digital media assets." The investigation revealed that amid their financial troubles, the Cartwrights had diversified into entertainment and digital media, acquiring several content distribution platforms to offset losses in their hotel division. These digital properties, undervalued and poorly managed, held significant potential under the right leadership. "They're selling assets to cover legal costs and tax liabilities," reported Thomas during a strategy session. "Including DigiStream Networks, a small but promising distribution platform for video and music content." Lydia studied the prospectus carefully, recognizing the strategic value immediately. "Structure an offer through Harmony Capital," she decided, referring to their recently established investment arm. "Use the holding company structure so they won't know who's acquiring it." "Is this about business or personal history?" Marcus asked gently, having been with Lydia since the beginning. "It's about smart business," she replied without hesitation. "These assets have value that the Cartwrights don't recognize because they're still thinking like hoteliers, not digital innovators. Their distress is our opportunity." When the acquisition closed 3 weeks later, neither Jonathan nor any Cartwright executive knew that Harmony Media Group, Lydia's expanded enterprise, now owned a significant piece of their digital future. That same month, Maya and Zora performed with the New York Philharmonic's Young Artists Showcase, their dual appearance drawing attention from classical music critics and educational institutions alike. A representative from Juilliard attended, approaching Lydia and James afterward with barely contained excitement. "We rarely see such talent in students so young," he admitted. "Their technical proficiency is remarkable, but it's their emotional interpretation that truly sets them apart. They play with the depth of musicians 3 times their age." As the family drove home from the concert, the twins chattering excitedly in the back seat about the acoustics of the hall and the conductor's interpretation, James reached over to squeeze Lydia's hand. "You've given them everything: love, opportunity, stability. They're flourishing because of you." Lydia smiled, thinking of how far they had come from that tiny back room at Miss Ella's. "We've built something good together." The following spring, as Maya and Zora turned 12, Lydia discovered she was pregnant, an unexpected joy after years of trying. The twins received the news with characteristic thoughtfulness, immediately discussing how they could help with their future sibling and proposing lullabies they could compose. As her pregnancy progressed, Lydia continued her strategic acquisition of Cartwright digital assets through various shell companies and investment vehicles. Each purchase was financially sound, each property integrated into Harmony's expanding digital ecosystem, creating a network of content distribution channels that rivaled major media conglomerates. The contract for the Westchester house arrived the same day as the final paperwork for acquiring Digitone, the largest of the Cartwright media properties. Lydia signed both sets of documents at her desk, the symbolism not lost on her. A decade ago, Jonathan had dismissed her as inadequate for his world. Now she was purchasing pieces of his failing empire while preparing to move her family to a 7-bedroom estate in one of New York's most exclusive communities. The moving day brought a convoy of vehicles to their new home, moving trucks containing their belongings, vans delivering new furniture, and cars carrying Harmony employees who had volunteered to help organize the music room to exacting specifications. Miss Ella arrived in a town car sent by Lydia, her aging frame still elegant as she surveyed the grand property. "From that little room behind my house to this," she marveled, tears welling in her eyes. "You did this, Lydia, with talent and determination." The twins explored the extensive grounds with unbridled excitement, running through gardens and claiming bedrooms with views of the manicured lawns. James oversaw the delivery of a new Steinway grand piano, his gift to the family for their new home. That evening, as the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the family gathered in the newly arranged music room. Maya sat at the Steinway while Zora tuned her cello, preparing to christen the space with music. James placed his arm around Lydia, his hand resting protectively on her growing belly. "Our family in our new home," he said softly. "Perfect harmony." As the twins began to play a piece they had composed together, filling the room with notes that spoke of journey and arrival, of struggle and triumph, Lydia felt a profound sense of completion. She had built this, all of it, note by note, decision by decision, day by day. While observing her family in their new home, Lydia didn't know that in 2 years she would be pregnant again, and that this pregnancy would coincide with the moment she would become powerful enough to acquire majority control of Cartwright Holdings itself, culminating in an inevitable encounter with the man who had discarded her. While observing her family in their new home, Lydia didn't know that in 2 years she would be pregnant again, and that this pregnancy would coincide with the moment she would become powerful enough to acquire majority control of Cartwright Holdings itself, culminating in an inevitable encounter with the man who had discarded her. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lydia Washington Jones's office on the 45th floor of the Harmony Media Group headquarters. At 35, she possessed a confident elegance that came from building something substantial from nothing. Her tailored Prada maternity suit accommodated her 7-month pregnant belly while maintaining the polished appearance expected of a CEO overseeing a $300 million empire. "The results from the amniocentesis are perfect," James said, his voice warm through the phone speaker. "Identical twin boys, just like we suspected." Lydia placed a protective hand on her belly, emotion washing over her. "Another set of twins. Life has a sense of symmetry, doesn't it?" "Poetic justice," James agreed. "Are you feeling well enough for the board meeting?" "More than well. The quarterly numbers are exceptional. I'll see you at home tonight." After ending the call, Lydia reviewed the financial reports one last time before her executive team arrived. Harmony Media Group had evolved far beyond its origins as a small record label in Brooklyn. Now it encompassed multiple divisions: music production, streaming platforms, content creation studios, and a technology arm developing proprietary algorithms for content distribution. The twins, now 12, had blossomed into remarkable young women. Maya's piano compositions had won national recognition, while Zora's virtuosity with the cello had been featured on NPR's From the Top program, showcasing extraordinary young musicians. Both maintained perfect grade point averages at Dalton, their academic achievements matching their musical gifts. The intercom buzzed softly. "Ms. Washington Jones, the board members are assembled in the conference room." Lydia gathered her materials and made her way through the sleek corridors of the headquarters she had designed 2 years earlier. The glass-walled conference room offered panoramic views of Manhattan, the Harmony logo, an elegant stylized musical note, etched subtly into each pane. "Good morning," she greeted the assembled executives with the quiet authority that had become her trademark. "Before we begin our regular agenda, I'd like to direct your attention to the special prospectus on your tablets." The board members, a diverse group of industry veterans and innovative newcomers, activated their screens, eyes widening as they reviewed the document. "As you can see," Lydia continued, "we have an unprecedented opportunity. Cartwright Holdings is divesting significant portions of their business in response to the ongoing tax fraud investigation. Their digital media holdings in particular are being offered at remarkable discounts." Thomas Chen, her CFO, nodded appreciatively. "They're desperate for liquidity to cover legal costs and settlements. These assets are severely undervalued." "Precisely," Lydia agreed. "They built their digital division as a side project, never fully understanding its potential. Under our management, integrated with our existing platforms, these properties could generate 3 times their current revenue within 18 months. Marcus Jones, who had been with Lydia since her earliest days in the industry, studied her carefully. "The acquisition strategy is sound, but the structure is unusually complex. Multiple holding companies, shell corporations. There's a deliberate opacity here." Lydia met his gaze directly. "The complexity serves a strategic purpose. If Cartwright executives knew Harmony was the buyer, they might reconsider, regardless of their financial pressure. This approach ensures we acquire these assets at optimal valuation." The board approved the acquisition strategy unanimously, impressed by the financial projections and strategic vision. As they moved to other agenda items, Lydia felt a sense of satisfaction that was about business acumen, not personal vindication. The assets had genuine value, The fact that they belonged to Jonathan's struggling company was secondary to their strategic fit within her growing media ecosystem. That evening, as her driver navigated through Manhattan traffic toward their Westchester home, Lydia reviewed news alerts on her tablet. The headline from the Financial Times caught her attention immediately. Cartwright heir seeks investors as hotel empire teeters. The article detailed Jonathan Cartwright III's increasingly desperate attempts to shore up the family business following the tax scandal that had engulfed his father. Jonathan had assumed control of the company 5 years earlier, inheriting not only the prestigious hotel chain but apparently its problematic accounting practices as well. Now, facing federal investigations and massive penalties, he was quietly offering equity stakes to investors to maintain operational control. "Interesting timing," Lydia murmured, already formulating a strategy that would have been inconceivable even a few years ago. At home, the warm chaos of family life provided a welcome contrast to the calculated precision of her professional world. The twins were practicing in the music room, their instruments weaving complex patterns of sound that filled the house. James greeted her with a gentle kiss, his hand automatically finding her belly where their sons grew stronger each day. "Maya has news," he said, his eyes twinkling. "She wanted to wait until you were home." In the kitchen, Maya sat at the island counter, her posture betraying barely contained excitement as she clutched an envelope bearing the Harvard crest. "I got in," she announced, her voice vibrating with emotion. "Early admission to the composition program. They said my portfolio was unprecedented for a student my age." Lydia embraced her daughter, pride swelling in her chest. "At 15? Maya, that's extraordinary." "Zora has news too," James added, nodding toward the doorway where their other daughter now stood, cello case in one hand, a similar envelope in the other. "Yale," Zora said simply, her quiet confidence so different from her sister's exuberance. "Their performance department, full scholarship." Lydia felt momentarily overwhelmed. Her daughters, rejected by their biological father as unworthy of his dynasty, had secured places at two of the most prestigious universities in the country before even completing high school. The symmetry was both beautiful and painful. "We need to celebrate," James declared, already reaching for his phone to make dinner reservations. Later that night, after the celebration dinner and putting the twins to bed, Lydia sat in her home office reviewing the complex acquisition strategy her team had developed. The first phase, purchasing Cartwright's digital assets through shell companies, was already underway. The second phase was more ambitious, systematically acquiring Cartwright Holdings stock through various investment vehicles, accumulating ownership without triggering reporting requirements until they reached their target position. "It's not about revenge," she explained when James joined her, concerned about the intensity in her eyes. "It's about business opportunity. Their assets are undervalued because of mismanagement and legal troubles. Our management could restore and exceed their previous value." James studied her thoughtfully. "And if those assets happen to belong to the man who once told you that you were nothing, that's simply coincidental?" Lydia smiled, acknowledging the complexity of her motivations. "Let's call it a satisfying alignment of good business and poetic justice." The following week brought news that accelerated Lydia's plans. A private equity firm had begun aggressive moves to acquire Cartwright Holdings, intending to break up the company and sell its assets piecemeal. If successful, the iconic brand would be dismantled, its legacy reduced to a footnote in business case studies. "Jonathan is fighting it," reported Lydia's head of acquisitions during an emergency meeting, "but he needs friendly investors to maintain controlling interest. He's offering significant equity at distressed prices to select partners." Lydia made a decision that would alter the trajectory of both companies. "Increase our acquisition pace. I want us positioned to secure majority control before this private equity deal advances." Over the next month, Harmony Capital, the investment arm of Lydia's company, executed a carefully orchestrated strategy to acquire Cartwright Holdings shares through 15 different entities. Each purchase stayed below reporting thresholds, allowing them to accumulate significant ownership without alerting Jonathan or his advisors to the identity of the buyer. As these business machinations unfolded, Lydia's pregnancy progressed smoothly. The twins became increasingly excited about their coming brothers, composing lullabies and helping prepare the nursery. James, now chief of cardiothoracic surgery at New York Presbyterian, balanced his demanding schedule to attend every prenatal appointment, his medical expertise bringing additional comfort during this pregnancy. On a brisk April morning, while reviewing the latest acquisition reports in her home office, Lydia received an unexpected invitation. Her assistant forwarded an email from the Greenwich Country Club Foundation, requesting her participation as the keynote speaker and lead donor for their annual benefit supporting musical education for underprivileged youth. The event chair specifically mentioned being impressed by your daughter's performances at Juilliard's Winter Showcase, her assistant noted. They're hoping the Washington Jones family might perform together at the benefit. Lydia was about to decline. The event date was uncomfortably close to her due date, when a detail in the invitation caught her attention. Listed among the event committee members was Eleanor Cartwright, Jonathan's mother. The benefit would be held at the Greenwich Country Club, the epicenter of Connecticut's old money social circles, precisely the world Jonathan had once declared would never accept someone like her. With a sense of completion that felt almost preordained, Lydia dictated her acceptance, confirming that she and her daughters would perform at the event. 2 days later, her acquisition team delivered the news she had been strategically working toward. Through their various holdings, Harmony Media Group now controlled 48% of Cartwright Holdings stock. A final purchase of 3% would give them effective control of the company. The remaining shares we need are being offered directly by Cartwright himself, her advisor explained. He's scheduled a private placement to select investors next week. If we participate through our Meridian Partners entity, we can secure the position we need. The final acquisition was executed with precision, the paperwork processed through legal channels that obscured the ultimate ownership structure. When the transaction cleared, Lydia Washington Jones, the woman Jonathan Cartwright had once dismissed as inadequate for his world, became the majority shareholder of his family's company. That evening, as she reviewed the guest list for the Greenwich Country Club benefit, Lydia discovered another piece of information that completed the circle. Jonathan Cartwright III would be attending with his fiancée, Clarissa Harrison, daughter of Senator William Harrison. According to Society columns, they planned to announce their engagement formally at the event, a strategic alliance meant to rehabilitate the Cartwright image through connection to the powerful Harrison family. As Lydia felt one of her twin sons kick strongly against her palm, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared young woman clutching a positive pregnancy test in Jonathan's luxury apartment could never have imagined that 15 years later, she would not only have built her own empire, but would now control his. "Is everything all right?" James asked, finding her lost in thought in her office. "Perfect," she replied, showing him the acquisition confirmation and the event details. Everything has come full circle. When she discovered through an emergency ultrasound that she wasn't expecting one baby, but two, she had felt overwhelmed and alone. Now, expecting her second set of twins with a husband who adored her and their family, while simultaneously taking control of the company that represented the dynasty once deemed beyond her reach, Lydia felt nothing but gratitude for the difficult path that had led her here. While preparing for the event, Lydia didn't imagine that in less than 24 hours, Jonathan's world would completely crumble before his eyes when he finally faced not only the woman he had discarded, but the extraordinary daughters whose existence he didn't even suspect. While preparing for the event, Lydia didn't imagine that in less than 24 hours, Jonathan's world would completely crumble before his eyes when he finally faced not only the woman he had discarded, but the extraordinary daughters whose existence he didn't even suspect. The Greenwich Country Club gleamed under the early evening sky, its colonial architecture highlighted by strategically placed lights that cast a golden glow across the manicured grounds. Luxury vehicles formed an orderly procession at the entrance, where valets in crisp uniforms received keys from guests in formal attire. Lydia gazed out the window of her Range Rover as her driver navigated the winding driveway. Her Vera Wang gown, an elegant creation in midnight blue that gracefully accommodated her 7-month pregnancy, had been selected with meticulous care for this evening. Her hair, styled in sophisticated waves, framed a face that radiated confidence rather than the uncertainty that had once defined her visits to such exclusive spaces. "The girls texted," James said, checking his phone. "They're already inside with the string quartet doing a final sound check." Lydia nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her belly where her twin sons stirred. "Tonight feels like more than a charity event." "Because it is," James replied, his eyes warm with understanding. He had never met Jonathan Cartwright, but he knew the shadow that man had cast over Lydia's early life. "Whatever happens, we face it as a family." Inside the grand ballroom, Jonathan Cartwright III adjusted his bow tie before a gilded mirror, trying to project the confidence that had once come naturally. At 42, he maintained his athletic build, though premature gray at his temples and deepening lines around his eyes betrayed the stress of recent years. "Jonathan, darling, the Harrisons are looking for you." His mother, Eleanor Cartwright, approached with champagne flute in hand. Despite her 70 years, she remained an imposing figure in New York society, her silver hair perfectly coiffed above a designer gown dripping with family heirlooms. "Senator Harrison wants to discuss wedding arrangements before the formal announcement tonight." Jonathan forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The engagement to Clarissa Harrison represented salvation for the Cartwright dynasty rather than a love match. Her father's political influence could open doors, deflect regulatory scrutiny, and help resurrect the family business from the ashes of scandal. That Clarissa was beautiful and well-bred made the arrangement palatable, if not passionate. "Of course, Mother. I'll find them now." Across the ballroom, wealthy patrons in formal wear circulated with practiced ease, champagne glasses clinking as donations were pledged for young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds. The irony that such privileged people gathered in exclusive settings to discuss access for all was lost on no one, yet the ritual continued year after year. "There he is," boomed Senator William Harrison, a robust man with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wielding power. "My future son-in-law, let's toast to tonight's announcement and the future merger of our interests." Clarissa Harrison, 28 and impeccably groomed, smiled demurely at Jonathan's side, her hand displaying the massive diamond engagement ring that had been featured in Town and Country magazine. The Cartwright-Harrison union would dominate society pages for months, precisely the positive publicity Jonathan desperately needed. Jonathan's forced smile froze when the master of ceremonies approached the microphone, adjusting it slightly before addressing the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we announce the generous commitment from the Harrison family to our institution, we have a special performance. As a special favor to the Cartwright family, we are delighted to present Grammy winner and New York philanthropist Lydia Washington Jones, accompanied by her talented daughters." Jonathan choked on his bourbon, spilling part of the amber liquid on his immaculate tuxedo. That name, a name he hadn't heard in 15 years but occasionally appeared in his guilty nightmares. "Jonathan?" Clarissa touched his arm, concern in her perfectly made-up eyes. "Are you all right?" Before he could respond, the side doors opened, and time seemed to slow to an excruciating crawl. Lydia entered the ballroom with the serene confidence of someone who belonged there, her pregnancy displayed proudly in the elegant gown. Behind her walked 2 teenage girls in coordinated navy dresses, carrying musical instruments, one a violin, the other a cello. "My God," whispered Eleanor Cartwright, clutching her son's arm with surprising strength. "Those girls!" Jonathan couldn't breathe. The teenagers were perfect reflections of each other, tall, graceful, with golden brown skin and dark curls framing delicate faces. But it was their eyes that paralyzed him, identical pairs of striking green eyes, the distinctive shade that had marked Cartwright heirs for generations. "Jonathan," Senator Harrison frowned, looking from the twins to him with dawning comprehension. "Those young women bear a remarkable resemblance to you, don't they?" Whispers rippled through the ballroom as Lydia positioned herself at the piano, her daughters preparing their instruments beside her. Before beginning to play, she adjusted the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here supporting young musicians who, like I once was, just need an opportunity to shine." Her eyes swept the room until they found Jonathan's. For a microsecond, something flashed in them. Recognition, perhaps a shadow of old pain, before her expression returned to professional serenity. The performance was extraordinary. The twins played with precision and emotion that drew tears from several guests. Their technical mastery would have been impressive in musicians twice their age. In teenagers, it was nothing short of miraculous. When they finished, thunderous applause filled the room. Jonathan remained frozen, unable to tear his gaze from the three women who represented everything he had discarded. "What a magnificent performance," Lydia declared into the microphone after the music concluded. "This song is dedicated to the man who told me I would never be anything, the same man who doesn't know that his twin daughters have just earned full scholarships to Harvard and Yale. Maya has been accepted to Harvard's composition program at 15, while Zora will attend Yale's performance department. Extraordinary achievements for any teenager, wouldn't you agree?" Senator Harrison's eyes narrowed, alternating between the twins and his future son-in-law as understanding slowly transformed his expression from confusion to cold fury. "How interesting life works," Lydia continued, her voice smooth yet audible throughout the silent ballroom. "While some struggled to keep their hotels afloat after their parents' tax scandals, some of us built empires from nothing. In fact, my record label recently acquired majority ownership of Cartwright Holdings through a silent acquisition offer." Shocked murmurs swept through the gathering. Jonathan's face drained of all color. The Cartwright family had sold shares to anonymous investors in recent months, desperate for capital to stay afloat. "Jonathan!" hissed Senator Harrison. "What the hell is happening here?" Lydia descended from the stage with Grace, her daughters at her side. As she moved among the guests, she paused briefly beside Jonathan. "These are Maya and Zora," she said quietly, for his ears alone. "Your biological daughters, who never needed your name or money to become extraordinary." "Lydia, I didn't know... Jonathan stammered, his world visibly crumbling around him. "Obviously," she replied calmly. "And now it doesn't matter. These babies I'm carrying are the heirs to two powerful legacies. Mine and my husband's, Dr. James Jones, recently appointed chief of cardiac surgery at New York Presbyterian." She gestured subtly toward the distinguished man approaching, pride evident in his face as he looked at Lydia and the girls. "As for you, Jonathan," Lydia concluded with serene composure, "you're merely a footnote in the story we'll tell. I hope you enjoy your engagement. I've heard the Harrison family values integrity and honesty highly." With that, she moved away, leaving Jonathan facing Senator Harrison's furious glare and Clarissa's shocked expression, having approached in time to hear the revelation. "Is this true?" Clarissa demanded, her voice trembling. "You have daughters you never acknowledged?" "It's complicated," Jonathan began, but Senator Harrison cut him off with a dismissive gesture. "Save it. Our arrangement presumed a certain level of ethical foundation." The senator turned to his daughter. "Clarissa, we're leaving. Now." A few yards away, James Jones embraced his stepdaughters proudly, then offered his arm to his wife, creating a perfect picture of family unity. The contrast couldn't have been more evident. On one side, the Washington Jones family, built on love and respect. On the other, Jonathan Cartwright III, watching his carefully constructed plans crumble in real time. As Lydia and her family moved toward the exit, guests parted before them, expressions ranging from shock to admiration. The wealthy donors who had once viewed Lydia as an interesting novelty, a successful black woman who had penetrated their exclusive world, now regarded her with new respect tinged with fear. She wasn't just talented and successful, she was powerful enough to orchestrate the downfall of one of their own. In the limousine heading home, Maya finally broke the silence. "Was that him? Our biological father?" Lydia nodded, meeting her daughter's eyes, Jonathan's eyes, with steady calm. "Yes, that was Jonathan Cartwright III. He looked smaller than I imagined," Zora observed thoughtfully. "Less substantial." James squeezed Lydia's hand. "Sometimes the people who hurt us most become diminished when we outgrow the pain they caused." As Manhattan's skyline came into view, glittering against the night sky, Lydia felt an unexpected sense of peace. The confrontation with Jonathan hadn't brought the vindictive satisfaction she might once have imagined. Instead, it felt like closing a book she had finished reading, acknowledging its influence on her journey while recognizing it no longer held power over her story. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "With his company, I mean." "Business continues," Lydia replied simply. "Harmony Media Group will restructure Cartwright Holdings, preserve what works, improve what doesn't. It's not personal anymore, it's just good business." Later that night, as James slept beside her, Lydia stood at their bedroom window overlooking the moonlit gardens of their Westchester estate. Her hands cradled her pregnant belly, feeling the gentle movements of the twins growing within. The symmetry wasn't lost on her, carrying 2 new lives as the chapter with Jonathan finally closed. She thought of the frightened young woman she had been, devastated by rejection, and wished she could tell her younger self that the path ahead, though difficult, would lead to something far greater than anything Jonathan Cartwright could have offered. While Jonathan faced the shattered pieces of his life and reputation, Lydia Washington Jones had everything she had ever worked for, and more importantly, everything she deserved. While Jonathan faced the shattered pieces of his life and reputation, Lydia Washington Jones had everything she had ever worked for, and more importantly, everything she deserved. The morning after the Greenwich Country Club event, New York awakened to headlines that sent tremors through financial and social circles alike. The Wall Street Journal's front page declared in bold type, "Cartwright faces family crisis. Engagement canceled after shocking revelations." Jonathan sat alone in his increasingly empty office, staring at the computer screen where Cartwright Holdings stock continued its 3rd consecutive day of free fall. Each downward tick represented another nail in the coffin of the dynasty his ancestors had built. His phone rang incessantly, journalists, attorneys, furious shareholders demanding explanations. When his secretary's voice came through the intercom, it carried the weary tone of someone who had been fielding hostile calls all morning. "Mr. Cartwright, your mother on line 2. Jonathan picked up, bracing himself. "Mother." "The lawyers have confirmed it." Eleanor Cartwright's voice sounded drained, defeated. "Lydia Washington Jones indeed holds 51% of the company shares. She's sent formal notification. There's a board meeting scheduled next week to discuss restructuring. Your position as CEO is compromised." After ending the call, Jonathan did something he hadn't done since childhood. He wept, not just for the loss of control over the family company, but for the magnitude of what he had rejected 15 years earlier. Opening his browser, he typed Maya and Zora Washington Jones, finding dozens of articles about the prodigious twins, videos of their performances, interviews about their early acceptances to Ivy League universities, photographs of them with Lydia and James at charity events. A complete family, a family he could have been part of. The twins' faces stared back at him from the screen, their remarkable green eyes, his eyes, seeming to ask silent questions he had no answers for. In one video, Maya played a complex piano piece of her own composition, her concentration absolute, her talent undeniable. Another showed Zora discussing the emotional language of classical music with an interviewer, articulating concepts that seemed impossible for a 15-year-old. These extraordinary young women carried his DNA, yet he had known nothing of them, had contributed nothing to their development, had missed every milestone, every achievement, every moment that had shaped them into the poised, talented individuals who had performed at the country club. 3 days later, after sleepless nights and increasingly desperate consultations with attorneys who offered little hope, Jonathan parked his Mercedes-Benz outside the Harmony Media Group headquarters. The gleaming skyscraper stood in stark contrast to the fading grandeur of the Cartwright Holdings offices, a physical manifestation of how Lydia had surpassed him. "I need to see Lydia Washington Jones," he told the receptionist, who regarded him with professional detachment. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No, but tell her it's Jonathan Cartwright. Please." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly with recognition before her professional demeanor reasserted itself. "One moment." After 20 minutes of pleading and waiting, during which several employees passed through the lobby, giving him curious glances, a sleek executive assistant appeared. "Ms. Washington Jones will grant you 5 minutes," she informed him, gesturing toward the elevator. Lydia's office occupied the entire top floor, with panoramic views of the city she had conquered. She didn't rise when he entered, merely indicated the chair across from her imposing desk. "Thank you, Samantha. No interruptions, please." When they were alone, the silence hung between them like concrete. Jonathan stared at the woman he had once discarded, confident, successful, radiant with her pregnancy and accomplishments. The contrast with the frightened young singer who had stood in his apartment 15 years ago couldn't have been more pronounced. "I came to apologize," he finally said, his voice breaking. "What I did to you, what I said, was unforgivable." Lydia studied him with an analytical gaze, as one might examine an interesting but ultimately inconsequential artifact. "Are you here to apologize or to try to save your position in the company?" "Both, honestly," he admitted, surprising himself with this candor. "But mostly, I wanted to know if there's any possibility of meeting my daughters." "They are not your daughters, Jonathan," Lydia replied, leaning forward slightly. "Biologically, yes, they share your DNA. But fatherhood is much more than biology. James is their father in every way that matters." "I understand. But perhaps, with time—" "Let me be clear," Lydia interrupted, her tone firm but not hostile. "I didn't orchestrate any of this as revenge. The acquisition of Cartwright Holdings was a purely business decision. Your properties are undervalued, and your historic brand has potential under proper management." "And the event? That performance at the club?" A slight smile touched Lydia's lips. "Coincidence. I was invited as the principal donor to the program. When I learned you would be there, I decided it was time for the truth to emerge. Not for revenge, but for transparency. Your daughters deserve to know their origins." Jonathan swallowed hard. "Do they know about me?" "They know their biological father chose not to be part of our lives. Now they know your name. What happens next depends on them. If they wish to meet you someday, I won't interfere. They're brilliant young women capable of making their own decisions." When Jonathan left the imposing Harmony Media Group building, he felt strangely lighter despite having lost everything. The meeting with Lydia had resulted in no promises, no dramatic reconciliation, only the harsh truth. He had made a choice 15 years ago, and now he lived with its consequences. A week later, the Cartwright Holdings board meeting confirmed the inevitable. Jonathan would be replaced as CEO by an executive of Lydia's choosing. They offered him a consultative position, a role without real power but allowing him to save face. That same afternoon, as he cleared out his office, Jonathan received an unexpected email from Maya Washington Jones Juilliard. Edu. Subject: Questions. "Mr. Cartwright, my mother informed me that you expressed interest in meeting us. I have some questions about family medical history and other practical matters. If you're willing, Could you meet my sister and me for coffee next week? We'll understand if you prefer not to respond. Sincerely, Maya Washington Jones. Jonathan stared at the message, reading and rereading the formal yet open words from the daughter he had never known. With trembling fingers, he typed a response accepting the invitation, careful not to overstate his expectations or make promises he might not be able to keep. Across the city, Lydia sat in the music room of their Westchester home, listening as her daughters practiced for an upcoming charity recital. James sat beside her, his hand protectively covering hers atop her rounded belly. There was no bitterness in her heart, only gratitude for the path she had traveled. "You're okay?" James asked softly. "I heard he came to your office." "I'm at peace," Lydia replied, smiling at her husband. "I didn't need Jonathan to build all this. His rejection gave me a strength I didn't know I possessed." As the last notes of the music filled the room, Lydia felt the babies moving inside her. Her family, her empire, her life, everything built note by note, brick by brick with determination and integrity. Jonathan Cartwright III might have been the man who rejected her, but he had ultimately become merely a chapter in a much greater symphony she had composed for herself. Maya finished the piece with a flourish, then turned to her mother. "I emailed him, asked if we could meet." "And?" Lydia asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. "He said yes. Zora isn't sure she wants to come, but I'm curious." Maya's green eyes, so like Jonathan's, held a maturity beyond her years. "Not for him. For me. I want to understand where I come from to better know who I am." Zora joined them, setting her cello carefully in its stand. "I'll go eventually, just not the first time. I need to process this differently." James nodded supportively. "Whatever you both decide, we're here for you." Later that evening, as James reviewed medical journals and the twins completed homework in their rooms, Lydia stood by the window overlooking their property. The woman who had once been evicted from a tiny Harlem apartment now owned estates, companies, and, ironically, the very enterprise whose heir had deemed her unworthy. Yet her true wealth wasn't in properties or balance sheets. It was in the family she had created, the integrity with which she had built her success, and the knowledge that she had risen not through vindictiveness, but through vision and perseverance. The following week, from a discreet distance, Lydia watched as Maya met Jonathan at a cafe in Manhattan. Her daughter sat poised and confident, asking questions with the analytical precision that characterized her approach to everything. Jonathan appeared nervous, humbled, occasionally reaching toward Maya before pulling back, respecting boundaries that 15 years of absence had created. Lydia didn't need to hear their conversation to understand its nature. This wasn't a fairy tale reunion or a dramatic reconciliation. It was something more realistic and perhaps more valuable, the beginning of a cautious understanding between a young woman seeking knowledge of her origins and the man whose choices had shaped her life from a distance. As she observed this meeting between her daughter and her former love, Lydia felt the final pieces of an old pain dissolve. Jonathan had once predicted she would amount to nothing without him. Instead, she had built everything despite him. The true revenge wasn't in his downfall or her acquisition of his company. It was in the extraordinary life she had created, a life so full and complete that his rejection had become merely a footnote in her remarkable story. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.